What if I told you your entire life has been lived through someone else's eyes? Not because you're weak, but because you were programmed to forget who's really looking. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why your pain was never the problem. Your perception was, if we're being honest. There comes a moment when you stop recognizing your own life. You look around and something feels wrong, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply off. Like you're performing in a play written by someone else, trapped inside a story that was never truly yours. Every day feels pre-scripted. Wake up, do the thing, meet the expectations, play the role, smile when you're supposed to, numb when you can't. It's not that you're broken, it's that your soul is exhausted from trying to meet the demands of a world that never asked who you really are. You go through the motions like a prisoner, except there are no guards, no bars, no visible sentence. Just a quiet, constant sense that your freedom expired a long time ago and no one noticed, not even you. But here's the truth. You're not in prison. You're just behaving like someone who believes they deserve to be there. Maybe that belief came from your childhood or from years of being told what's normal, what's enough, what's wrong with you. Maybe it came from chasing approval that never filled you. Maybe it came from confusing silence with peace or control with safety. Either way, the bars are invisible, but they're real because you believe they are. This isn't about motivation. It's not about fixing your life. It's about seeing the illusion that keeps you trapped inside a version of yourself that was never fully alive. You're not lazy. You're overstimulated. You're not lost. You've been surviving on autopilot. You're not hopeless. You're just unacknowledged. You've spent years trying to change yourself when the real prison was never who you are. It was how you see who you are. And that changes everything. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your pain isn't a sentence. It's not the end. It's the beginning of learning how to see. You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Just change your mindset. Repeat these affirmations. Visualize a better future, and it will come. But the more you tried to believe those words, the heavier the guilt became. Because deep down, something inside you didn't shift. You said the mantras, you did the meditations, you tried to stay positive, and yet, the weight inside your chest never really left. You started wondering, what's wrong with me that this doesn't work? That's the illusion. You were told you are the author of your life, but they never explained what's actually writing your story. They skipped the part where the unconscious, the hidden architecture of your pain, your beliefs, your past, ghost writes your every thought. So you tried to paint a new picture on a canvas still soaked in shame, fear, and survival. That's why it didn't work. You tried to affirm worthiness while still carrying the buried voice that said, "You're not enough." You visualized abundance, but inside, your nervous system was still bracing for disappointment. You tried to be grateful while something deeper in you was screaming, "I'm tired of pretending." Most psychologists won't tell you this, but the system was never designed to help you see. It was built to help you control, avoid, and suppress. Control your emotions. Avoid your shadow. Suppress the signals of trauma that your body tries to send every day. What they sell you is relief. What you need is revelation. And there's a huge difference. When you affirm, "I am loved," without facing the root belief, "I am unworthy," you don't heal. You split yourself in two. When you repeat, "I am free," while your inner child still feels caged, you create dissonance. You look happy on the outside, but inside, you're still fighting the same ghosts. You followed all the advice. You did everything right. But no one told you the one thing that could set you free. Your thoughts are not just yours. They are constructed by patterns, defenses, and generational programs you never consciously chose. So when someone tells you, "Just think positive," what they're really saying is, "Keep avoiding what hurts." And so the cycle continues. Positivity becomes another mask. Healing becomes performance, and you start to believe that maybe you're just too broken to be fixed. But what if you were never broken at all? What if your pain isn't a flaw in the system, but proof that you were never meant to live inside one. And what if the reason nothing ever worked is because you were trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled? But there's something even more terrifying, and we'll get to that next. Here's the real trap. You believed your perception was reality. You believed that how you see the world is how the world is. You thought your reactions were truth, your judgments were facts, your fears were warnings, your guilt was proof. But perception is not a mirror. It doesn't reflect what's there, it's a painting. And the brush is in your unconscious hand. Everything you experience, every relationship, every failure, every emotion, is filtered through the canvas of your nervous system, your wounds, your story. You don't react to life as it is. You react to life as your mind tells you it is. And here's the twist no one told you. You're not a prisoner in this process. You're the artist. Yes, your palette may be filled with colors you didn't choose. Fear, rejection, abandonment, shame. But they're still your colors now. And once you become aware of them, you can mix them differently. You can reframe how you interpret what you see. You can start painting something new, something yours. It's not about lying to yourself, it's about seeing the layers that were there all along. Maybe what you thought was failure was self-protection. Maybe what you called weakness was sensitivity no one ever taught you to hold. Maybe what you thought was reality was just a lens someone else handed you when you were too young to question it. You don't have to keep painting with the same old strokes. You don't have to keep believing that your lens is the truth. You can step back, breathe, and say, wait, who taught me to see it this way? And that moment, that question, is the beginning of transformation. If this resonates with you, if you feel like these words were meant for something inside you, subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm show this truth to others who are ready to face their shadow. This isn't about building an audience. It's about building a space for those who are done running from themselves. Let's go deeper. Because by now you've realized your perception isn't neutral. It's shaped, sculpted, in many ways programmed. And until you understand how, you'll keep trying to change your life without touching the blueprint that builds it. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not evil, not negative, just unseen. It's the collection of everything you've learned to hide, your rage, your envy, your grief, your shame, even your power. The parts of you that didn't feel acceptable, so you buried them. But what you bury doesn't die, it grows roots. And from those roots grow the filters through which you now perceive the world. That's why some people seem to attract rejection everywhere they go, why others sabotage love the moment it gets real, why success feels unsafe, why stillness feels threatening. It's not the world punishing them, it's the shadow protecting them. Because somewhere along the line, love became dangerous. Visibility became unsafe. Rest meant vulnerability. So the unconscious said, better to destroy this than risk pain again. Freud called these protective habits defense mechanisms. And even though they sound clinical, they're deeply human. Repression is when you push the unbearable out of awareness. But your body still remembers. That's why your jaw clenches when no one's yelling. That's why your stomach drops in harmless conversations. The trauma didn't disappear, it just moved. Projection is when you assign your shadow to someone else. You judge others for being selfish, angry, insecure, because it's easier than seeing those traits in yourself. But every time you attack them out there, it's your shadow crying for acceptance in here. Rationalization is when you turn pain into a story that makes sense. You convince yourself, they didn't mean to hurt me, or I probably overreacted because admitting the full truth would rip the floor out from under your identity. But every rationalization costs you another piece of authenticity. Now add to this the family programming you inherited before you even formed a self. You didn't choose the palette, you were handed it. If love in your home was conditional, you learned to perform. If anger was punished, you learned to suppress. If your sadness was ignored, you learned to smile through it. And here's the twist. These inherited patterns now drive your adult choices. You're not choosing partners, careers, or lifestyles. You're reenacting early dynamics. Repeating familiar pain because to the unconscious, familiar feels safer than free. Most of what you call yourself is actually a theater of roles you never auditioned for. Your conscious mind is the actor reading lines. But the unconscious? That's the director, the stage designer, the one who dimmed the lights, painted the background, and chose which scenes to replay. And the worst part? You've been playing this script so long, you forgot it wasn't yours. You thought you were bad at life, but maybe you were just too loyal to a character written in childhood. You thought you were broken, but maybe you were just miscast. And maybe, just maybe, your pain isn't dysfunction. It's an outdated instruction, because pain that goes unexamined doesn't just disappear, it becomes your filter. You start seeing life through it. Every connection becomes a threat. Every compliment becomes manipulation. Every opportunity becomes pressure. You don't live your life, you defend it. And as long as you're defending yourself from pain you don't understand, you'll never feel safe enough to create something new. But here's the most painful truth of all. Here's what no one told you. You don't need to fix yourself. Because you're not broken, you're just unaware. For years you've tried to heal, to transform, to be better. But underneath all that striving was a hidden belief. Something in me is wrong. That belief wasn't yours to begin with. It was planted. And every time you tried to change your thoughts, change your habits, change your mindset, you were watering the very root of that lie. Because the illusion is this: if I think differently, I'll be free. But the truth is far deeper, far more disruptive. The real shift is not to change your thoughts. It's to observe who's doing the thinking. Who is speaking in your mind when you panic about failure? Who is narrating your relationships when you feel small? Who taught you to interpret your worth based on achievement, attention, or control? The voice in your head isn't you. It's a construction made from teachers, parents, partners, society, trauma. It was built to keep you safe, not to help you live. And it's been running the show, in your name. That's why nothing ever truly worked. You were trying to repaint the surface, but the brush was still held by an unconscious hand. You were editing sentences while the script was still being written behind the curtain. Here's the paradox. Freedom doesn't begin with action. It begins with awareness. True transformation happens the moment you step out of yourself, not to escape, but to witness. To become the one who watches, not the thought, not the reaction, not the emotion, but the observer of it all. That's the first glimpse of your inner artist. The moment you realize, I am not the painting, I am the one holding the brush. From that space, you don't control life, you participate in it. You don't react, you respond. You don't perform, you create. And yes, it will feel disorienting at first, because when you stop identifying with the noise, the silence feels unfamiliar. When you stop trying to be someone, it's terrifying not to know who you are, but that's the gift, because in that space where the roles fall away, you finally have room to become the one who sees clearly. No more masking, no more fixing, no more chasing a better version of yourself. Only this, the presence to witness what is, and the courage to create what can be. But this awakening is only the beginning, and what comes next changes everything. So how do you begin to shift perception, not as a mental trick, but as a creative act? First, learn to pause. Most of your suffering doesn't come from what happens, it comes from how quickly you react. You've been trained to respond automatically. A certain tone triggers anxiety. A look causes shutdown. One word and your entire body floods with old panic, as if the past is happening all over again. The work begins in the space between the stimulus and the reaction. That split-second gap where you feel heat rising, fists clenching, breath shortening. Pause there. Not forever, just long enough to witness what's happening. That pause is sacred. That pause is you, reclaiming authorship over your response. That's the first brushstroke of creative perception. Second, shadow work. Start writing from the voices you've silenced. the parts of you that feel unworthy, jealous, petty, angry, lost. Not to shame them, but to hear them. Sit down with a pen and write from their perspective. Let them speak without filter. Let them rage, mourn, ache. Then switch. Respond from the part of you that can hold those voices without judgment. You'll discover something profound. These rejected parts don't need to be exiled, they just want to be seen. You can also role-play your shadow. Literally take on the voice, the posture, the tone of a part of you you've disowned. Give it shape, give it movement. Let it live for a moment in a safe, conscious space. When you do this, you stop fearing the shadow. You become curious about it. And that curiosity softens everything. Third, body awareness. Your unconscious doesn't just live in your thoughts, it lives in your nervous system. Notice, where does anxiety live in your body? Where do you hold rejection? Where does shame settle? Breathe into those places, not to release them, but to recognize them. Feel them as part of your landscape, a color in your palette. The body holds stories long before the mind understands them. And the more fluently you speak your body's language, the more clearly you can rewrite the internal script. Fourth, reframe fear. Fear isn't your enemy. It's a flashlight. It shines on the exact place your growth lives. When fear shows up, ask, what is this trying to protect me from? What does it want me to see? Let fear become your compass, not to run, but to understand. Finally, small shifts. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to notice when the old story is trying to repeat itself and choose one small, conscious alternative. That's it. A breath before reacting, a moment of stillness before apologizing for existing, a choice to feel instead of numb. These are your brushstrokes. And as you keep painting, deliberately, curiously, gently, your perception begins to shift. Not because you forced it, but because you finally remembered you are the one holding the brush. If you're ready to stop playing roles, write, "I'm taking off the mask" in the comments. Let's see who's ready for real life. You were never a prisoner, not really. The walls you felt pressing in, the limits, the pressure, the fear, they were never made of brick. They were made of perception. The sentence you thought you were serving? That was someone else's voice, someone else's story, replaying in your nervous system like a scratched record. You weren't caged, you were conditioned, and now you see it. You are not your pain. You are not your reactions. You are not your roles. You are the artist. And yes, you have scars. Yes, there is grief. Yes, there are chapters you wouldn't choose to relive. But those chapters gave you the palette. Those wounds gave you depth. That pain carved the exact hands now capable of shaping something new. Freedom doesn't mean the end of suffering. It means the end of fighting your suffering like it's the enemy. Because pain is not always punishment. Sometimes pain is movement. It's how the soul stretches. It's how the walls crack just enough to let the light change. The work isn't about creating a perfect life. It's about seeing life differently, with new eyes, with new hands, with the presence to say, even this I can use. Perception is not fixing, it's shifting, it's choosing. Choosing to see meaning where there was only noise. Choosing to sit still instead of escape. Choosing to meet yourself in the mess and not look away. You don't need a new version of yourself. You need the courage to reclaim the one who's always been here, watching, waiting, ready. This is the return. Not to who the world told you to be, but to the one who sees clearly, the one who paints, the one who decides, the one who was never trapped, just asleep. If you saw yourself in these words, write in the comments, "I no longer run from pain." Let's see how many are ready for the truth. This is only the beginning.